My name is Lorelei, and I thought I was in control. I believed I was the master puppeteer, pulling the strings of my own perfectly curated life. But I was wrong. The strings were pulling me, and on a cold autumn night, they finally snapped. It all ended with a threat that was meant to be a weapon. A finely crafted, poisoned dart aimed straight at his heart, designed to make him stop, to make him see, to make him beg. If you try anything, Donovan, I swear I'll leave you for someone who actually appreciates me, and you will never see me again. The words, laced with a venom I didn't know I possessed, hung in the air between us, shimmering with ugly power. I stood there, chest heaving, triumphant in my fury. This was the checkmate. I had him. He would crumble. He would pull me into his arms and promise to change, to listen, to be the man I needed him to be. Instead, he looked at me, not with anger, not with heartbreak, but with a terrifying, hollow calm. A small, sad smile touched his lips. "You know what, Lorelei?" he said, his voice unnervingly steady. "Maybe that's for the best. I'll make it easy for you." And then the world tilted on its axis. He didn't crumble. He didn't beg. He simply grabbed my arm, his grip not violent but absolute, and pulled me toward the front door. The shock was a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. Before I could process it, I was standing on the cold stone of our porch, the heavy oak doors slamming shut in my face. My husband, Donovan, my husband of 6 perfect hollow years, had just locked me out. The click of the deadbolt was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It wasn't just the sound of a door locking, it was the sound of my life ending. I banged on the door, my pathetic threats turning into desperate pleas. "Donovan, open the door! Donovan, I was just angry. Please." There was only silence. The manicured lawns of our perfect neighborhood slept under the indifferent moon. And as the freezing night air began to seep into my bones, a single, horrifying thought echoed in the ruins of my mind. How did it come to this? To understand how I ended up shivering in the garage of my own multi-million-dollar home, clad only in silk pajamas, you have to understand the silence that came before the storm. Our marriage had been a masterclass in quiet, opulent perfection. Donovan was the architect of my gilded cage. He was a good man, a brilliant businessman, and he loved me with a fierce, possessive totality that I mistook for strength. We met in college. He was the ambitious finance major who saw the world in numbers and opportunities. I was the art history student who saw it in color and emotion. He said I was his balance, the poetry to his prose. After we married, he built an empire, and he placed me on a throne at its center. The house was a palace of glass and white marble, my closet a museum of designer labels I rarely had occasion to wear. He showered me with gifts, surprise trips to Paris, a sapphire necklace that mirrored the color of his eyes, a brand new convertible I was too nervous to drive. He provided everything. He anticipated my every need before I knew I had it. And I was suffocating. My days were a beautiful, monotonous loop. Yoga at dawn, brunch with other wives who spoke of charity galas and tennis lessons, sterile afternoons spent wandering our cavernous, silent home. I was an exquisite ornament, polished and displayed. Donovan would come home, kiss my forehead, and tell me how beautiful I looked, never asking what I had done, because the answer was always the same: nothing. "I want to work, Don," I told him one night about 4 years into our marriage. He frowned, stirring his scotch. "Why? Lori, you don't need to. I make more than enough for us to live 10 lifetimes. I want you to relax, enjoy yourself." "This isn't enjoyment, it's waiting." I tried to explain. "Waiting for you to come home. Waiting for the weekend. I feel like my brain is turning to mush. I want to be a career woman, not just a housewife." He couldn't understand it. To him, providing for me so completely that I never had to lift a finger was the ultimate expression of love. My desire for a job felt like a rejection of that love, a criticism of the perfect life he had so meticulously built for me. But the longing was an ache, a persistent thrum of dissatisfaction beneath the surface of my perfect life. I submitted dozens of resumes, but my 4-year gap in employment and a degree in art history didn't open many doors in the corporate world. It was Talia, my best friend from college, who threw me a lifeline. We had reconnected after years apart, and I poured out my frustrations to her over coffee. "Are you sure about this, Lori?" she'd asked, her brow furrowed with concern. "You have a good life. Donovan adores you." "I'm not a doll, Talia. I need a purpose, I insisted. A week later, she sent me a job posting. A new luxury hotel, the Azure Grand, was opening downtown. They were hiring for all positions. Most of the senior roles were taken, but there was an opening for a front desk receptionist. It wasn't the glamorous career I'd envisioned, but it was a start. It was an escape. I polished my resume, wrote a passionate cover letter, and nailed the interview. When they called to offer me the job, I felt a surge of exhilaration I hadn't felt in years. It was mine, something I had earned all by myself. That night, I told Donovan. He tried to be supportive, I'll give him that. He uncorked a bottle of champagne and toasted to my new adventure, but I saw the flicker of disappointment in his eyes. He didn't want to share me with a schedule, with colleagues, with a world outside the one he had created for me. I'm so proud of you, he said, but his arms felt a little less secure around me that night. I didn't care. I was finally breaking free. I was so blissfully, stupidly unaware that I wasn't flying toward freedom. I was taking the first step off a cliff. The first few months at the Azure Grand were a whirlwind. I traded my silk robes for a tailored uniform, my leisurely mornings for the frantic energy of check-ins and check-outs. I loved it. I loved the structure, the challenge, the feeling of being useful. I was good at my job, quickly mastering the complex booking systems and learning how to handle demanding guests with a calm smile. My hard work didn't go unnoticed. Specifically, it didn't go unnoticed by Mr. Sterling, the hotel's general manager. He was in his late 40s, silver at the temples, with an impeccably tailored suit and an air of quiet authority. He was charismatic, professional, but there was an intensity in his gaze whenever he spoke to me. His compliments were always professional, yet they felt deeply personal. You have a natural elegance, Lorelei. You elevate the entire lobby, he'd say, his eyes holding mine for a moment too long. Donovan hated it. He hated that I came home tired, smelling of the hotel's signature lemongrass scent instead of the Chanel perfume he'd bought me. He hated the stories I told about my colleagues and the amusing anecdotes about difficult guests. It was a part of my life he had no control over, and it drove him mad. Our dinners became strained, the silence between us growing heavier. The tipping point came about 6 months in. Mr. Sterling called me into his office. Lorelei, he began, his voice smooth as velvet. I've been incredibly impressed with your performance. I'm hosting a small private gathering at my home this Friday for some of my key staff and friends, a sort of celebration for our successful launch. I would be honored if you would attend. My heart hammered in my chest. It was a validation, a sign that I was being seen as more than just a receptionist. I'd love to, I said, a thrill running through me. That Friday, I told Donovan I had to work a double shift to cover for a sick colleague. The lie slipped out so easily it scared me. He sighed, a gust of resignation. Of course you do. This job is taking over your life, Lori. It's just this once. I lied again, kissing his cheek before hurrying out the door. Mr. Sterling's penthouse was breathtaking, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city. The party was sophisticated, mostly men in expensive suits and a few other women from the hotel's management team. The champagne flowed freely, and I let it wash away the guilt of my deception. Mr. Sterling made a point of singling me out, introducing me to his influential friends, praising my work ethic. For the first time, I felt powerful. I felt seen. As the night wore on and the guests began to depart, I found myself alone with him. He refilled my glass, his fingers brushing against mine. You're wasted at the front desk, Lorelei, he murmured, his voice low. You have so much more potential than that. I was drunk on the champagne, on the praise, on the intoxicating feeling of being desired for my mind and not just my beauty. One thing led to another. He leaned in to kiss me, and I didn't pull away. That night, I betrayed Donovan in every way imaginable, in a stranger's bed, high above the city where my husband slept alone. The next morning, I woke up tangled in unfamiliar silk sheets. The space beside me was empty. On the nightstand was a stack of cash and a note written on hotel stationery. For your trouble, lock the door on your way out. Shame washed over me, hot and sickening. I felt cheap, used. I left the money on the table and fled, the walk of shame back to my car feeling like an eternity. I expected things to be awkward at work, but Mr. Sterling was the consummate professional. He greeted me with a polite nod, no hint of our shared secret in his eyes. I tried to bury the memory, to pretend it never happened. Then, 2 weeks later, he called me into his office again. A crisp, white envelope was on his desk. "The assistant manager position has unexpectedly become available," he said, his face unreadable. "I've reviewed all the candidates. I believe you are the best person for the job." He slid the envelope across the desk. It was an official offer letter, with a salary that was triple what I was making. I was stunned. I knew I wasn't qualified. There were supervisors and senior staff who had been there longer, who had more experience. This wasn't a promotion, it was a payment. "Of course," he added, a flicker of something dark in his eyes. "This position will require a closer working relationship, more late nights, more dedication." The message was clear. I held the letter in my trembling hands, the paper feeling as heavy as a tombstone. This was my chance, the career I had yearned for. All I had to do was sell my soul for it. I took a deep breath. "I accept," I said. When I told Donovan about my promotion, he was instantly suspicious. "Assistant manager? Already? Lori, that doesn't make sense. You've only been there for 6 months." "They see my potential, Don," I snapped, my defensiveness a shield for my guilt. "Maybe you should try being happy for me for once." He backed down, but the seed of doubt had been planted. From that day on, my affair with Mr. Sterling became a regular, unspoken part of my job description. We had late-night meetings in his office, business trips to suites within our own hotel. And with every lie I told Donovan, every secret I kept, the beautiful, gilded cage he had built for me began to feel less like a prison and more like a fortress I was desperate to protect. My life became a meticulously crafted lie. By day, I was the rising star at the Azure Grand, the sharp and capable assistant manager. By night, I was either the dutiful wife, feigning interest in Donovan's business deals, or I was Mr. Sterling's discreet mistress. I was caught in a current, and instead of fighting it, I learned to swim. The affair gave me a twisted sense of power. I was no longer just Donovan's pretty wife. I had my own secrets, my own sphere of influence, but it was a hollow victory, a counterfeit independence built on a foundation of deceit. Then Mr. Sterling announced he was going on a 2-month business trip through Asia. The thought of his absence should have been a relief, a chance to breathe. Instead, it left a void. I had grown accustomed to the adrenaline, the risk. The silence of my old life with Donovan now seemed more deafening than ever. That was when I met Landon. He was a guest at the hotel, a supposed freelance photographer from Australia, with a charming accent and eyes the color of the sea. I first noticed him arguing with a receptionist over a booking mix-up. He wasn't angry, but charmingly frustrated. I stepped in, using my newfound authority to smoothly resolve the issue, upgrading him to a junior suite for his trouble. "You're a lifesaver," he said, flashing a dazzling smile. "Landon, Lorelei," I replied, feeling an unbidden blush creep up my neck. Our conversations started innocently, at the front desk, then moved to text messages. He was witty and adventurous, and he seemed genuinely interested in me, not Lorelei the manager, or Lorelei the wife, but just Lorelei. He made me laugh in a way I hadn't in years. He listened to my dreams, my frustrations, and he made me feel understood. Donovan's suspicions grew with each passing day. My phone, once an object of indifference, was now perpetually in my hand. He'd see me smiling at the screen and ask what was so funny. "Just a silly meme Talia sent me." I'd lie, my heart pounding. "Share it then." I could use a laugh. He'd challenge and I'd have to scramble to find a plausible excuse. The house, once our sanctuary, became a battlefield of unspoken accusations and palpable tension. My friendship with Landon quickly bled into something more. We started meeting for coffee at discreet cafes, then for dinner at restaurants in neighborhoods where I was unlikely to be recognized. He was filling the void Mr. Sterling had left. But it felt different. With Sterling, it was a transaction. With Landon, I allowed myself to believe it was a connection. I told him I was married, but I painted a picture of a cold, loveless relationship, casting myself as the victim. He listened with sympathy, telling me I deserved to be happy. When Mr. Sterling returned from his trip, my carefully constructed world began to spin out of control. Suddenly, I was juggling 3 men: Donovan, the husband I was betraying every single day. Mr. Sterling, the boss who expected our affair to resume as if he'd never left. And Landon, the lover who believed he was rescuing me from a miserable marriage. I became a master puppeteer of my own life. I'd have a late meeting with Sterling, then rush off to a secret rendezvous with Landon, all while texting Donovan that I was stuck in traffic. I limited my time with Sterling, using my demanding schedule as an excuse, which only seemed to intrigue him more. I compartmentalized my life so rigidly that sometimes I felt like 3 different women inhabiting the same body. One evening, I was with Landon in his hotel room. He was tracing patterns on my back, whispering about the places he wanted to take me. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from Donovan. "Where are you, Lori? I made your favorite dinner." A moment later, another buzz. A text from Mr. Sterling. "My office, now." Lying there, between my lover's arms, with demands from my husband and my boss lighting up my phone, I didn't feel guilt or fear. I felt a dizzying, intoxicating thrill. I had a husband who provided for me, a boss who promoted me, and a lover who adored me. I thought I was playing the game, that I was in control of every piece on the board. I never once considered that I wasn't the player. I was the prize, the pawn, and the ultimate price to be paid. "Let's run away together," Landon said it one rainy afternoon, as we were huddled together in a small, forgotten bookstore. The words hung in the air, smelling of old paper and impossible dreams. "Don't be crazy, Landon." I laughed, but my heart fluttered. "I'm serious, Lorelei," he said, his expression earnest. "We could go back to Australia. I have a small place by the coast. We could start over. No more hiding, no more lies. Just you and me. You could finally be free." He painted a picture so vivid I could almost feel the ocean spray on my face. A life of passion, of freedom, of being truly seen and loved for who I was. It was everything my life with Donovan wasn't. The idea took root in my mind, a beautiful, poisonous flower. But there was a problem. "I can't just leave," I whispered. "I have nothing. All my money is tied up with my husband." Landon's expression softened with pity. "We'll figure it out. Love will find a way." A few days later, he came to me with the solution. He needed to put a down payment on a small photography studio back home, a venture that would support us while we got on our feet. If I could help him gather the funds, we could leave within a month. And that's when the final moral thread inside me snapped. I knew Donovan kept a safe in his home office, hidden behind a framed painting. He often kept large amounts of cash there for business emergencies. I'd seen him open it once or twice. I told myself it was my money too. I was entitled to it. It was my severance package from a loveless marriage, my ticket to a new life. The first time I did it, my hands shook so violently I could barely turn the dial. The safe clicked open. Inside were neat bundles of $100 bills. I took one, just one, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I gave it to Landon, who kissed me and called me his savior. It became a habit. Every few days, I would slip into Donovan's office and take another bundle. He started to notice. "Did you move some money from the safe, honey?" he asked casually one evening. "No, of course not. Why would I?" I replied, my voice a pitch too high. I thought I was being so clever, but I didn't know that my husband, the meticulous businessman, had already installed a tiny, motion-activated camera in his office. He was watching me, documenting my betrayal. With our escape fund growing, I knew I had to cut my final tie. I walked into Mr. Sterling's office and told him it was over. He was incredulous, then angry. "Is this about your husband? Is he suspicious?" "I just can't do this anymore," I said, my voice cold. His face hardened. "Don't be a fool, Lorelei. You have a good thing going here. I can even increase your salary if that's what this is about." He tried to buy me, to own me, just like Donovan did. The realization was sickening. "I quit," I said, standing up and walking out before he could say another word, leaving him stunned in my wake. It felt like a monumental victory. The plan was set. Landon had booked our tickets under false names for a Tuesday morning flight. I spent the weekend discreetly packing a suitcase with my most essential belongings, hiding it in the back of my closet. I was giddy with anticipation, my body humming with the electricity of my impending freedom. On Monday night, Donovan was unusually quiet at dinner. I assumed he was just brooding over my long hours at work. I felt a pang of something not quite guilt, but a faint sorrow for the man I was about to leave behind. He had loved me, in his own way. "I'm heading to bed early," I told him, giving him a perfunctory kiss on the cheek. "Long day tomorrow." He just nodded, his eyes distant. "You have no idea, Lori," he murmured, so quietly I almost didn't hear him. As I lay in our vast, empty bed, I didn't feel the slightest remorse. I was on the cusp of a new beginning, a life I had chosen and fought for. I drifted to sleep with Landon's name on my lips, dreaming of sunshine and ocean waves, completely oblivious to the fact that I was sleeping in the heart of a hurricane, and the storm was about to break. I was startled awake by the bedroom lights flicking on. Donovan was standing at the foot of the bed, fully dressed. His face was a mask of cold fury. "Get up," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the sleepy haze like a shard of glass. "Don? What's wrong? It's the middle of the night," I mumbled, sitting up. He didn't answer. He just walked over to my closet, opened the door, and pulled out the suitcase I had so carefully hidden. He threw it on the bed, the contents spilling across the silk duvet, my favorite dresses, a few pieces of jewelry, my passport. "Going somewhere?" he asked, his voice dripping with ice. My blood ran cold. It's for a work trip. It was last minute." "Ollie," he laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that didn't belong to him. "Stop lying, Lorelai. Just for once in your life. Stop lying." He walked out of the room, and I followed him, my bare feet padding silently on the cold marble floor. In the living room, he gestured to the coffee table. It was covered in photographs. Black and white, grainy images of me. Me kissing Mr. Sterling in his office. Me holding hands with Landon in a cafe. Me, my face a mask of concentration, taking money from his safe. My world shattered. I stared at the evidence of my sins, laid bare under the harsh lights of my perfect home. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. "Who are they?" he demanded, his voice finally cracking with the pain he had been suppressing. "Who are the men you threw our marriage away for?" Trapped, cornered, my survival instincts took over. My fear curdled into a desperate, defensive rage. "It's not my fault," I shrieked. "You pushed me away. You suffocated me." "I loved you," he roared back, the sound echoing through the silent house. "I gave you everything. Everything but what I wanted." And then I said it. The fatal, arrogant words. The threat I thought was my trump card. "If you try anything, Donovan, I swear I'll leave you for someone who actually appreciates me. And you will never see me again." That's when the calm settled over him. The calm that preceded my eviction into the cold night. As he dragged me to the door, all the fight went out of me, replaced by a paralyzing shock. This wasn't happening. This was a nightmare. After the door slammed shut, after my pleas went unanswered, I huddled in the garage, the concrete floor leaching the warmth from my body. My mind raced. Landon. I had to get to Landon. He would save me. He would know what to do. My phone was, by some miracle, in the pocket of my pajama pants. My fingers were stiff with cold as I dialed his number. It went straight to voicemail. Again and again. Panic began to claw at my throat. I spent the rest of the night in a miserable daze, huddled in the back seat of my unlocked convertible. When dawn finally broke, painting the sky in cruel, cheerful shades of pink and orange, Donovan's car roared to life. I scrambled out, running toward him as he backed out of the driveway. "Donovan, please. We can talk about this. I'm so sorry," I cried, banging on his window. He didn't even look at me. He sped past, leaving me standing in the driveway like a ghost. Desperation gave me a grim sense of purpose. Landon. I had to find him. Still in my silk pajamas, my hair a mess, my face stained with tears, I called for a taxi. I didn't care how I looked. I gave the driver the address of the Azure Grand, my hotel, the place where my downfall began. I burst into the lobby, earning scandalized looks from the staff who once reported to me. I ran to the front desk, to a young woman I had trained myself. "Landon, the guest in room 812, I said, my voice hoarse. "I need to speak to him. It's an emergency." The receptionist looked at her screen, her expression a mixture of pity and professional detachment. "I'm sorry, Miss Vance," she said, refusing to use my married name. "That guest is no longer with us." "What do you mean?" "His reservation is for the whole week." I. He checked out early this morning, ma'am, she said, her voice gentle. Around 4 a.m. The words didn't compute. 4 a.m. Right after my world had imploded. While I was shivering in the garage. He had run. No, I whispered. No, you're wrong. Check again. The room is empty, ma'am. He's gone. He was gone. And he had taken all the money with him. The money I had stolen. The money I had destroyed my life for. A scream tore from my throat. A raw, animal sound of pure agony. My knees buckled, and I collapsed onto the polished marble floor of the lobby I used to command. Security guards were there in an instant, their hands on my arms, gently but firmly lifting me up, escorting me out of the building. As they pushed me out onto the street, the morning sun felt like an accusation. I stood there, in my pajamas, with nothing. No husband, no lover, no money, no home. My friend Talia wouldn't even answer my calls. I had played the game, and I had lost everything. The aftermath was a swift, brutal demolition of the life I had known. The divorce proceedings were a humiliating formality. Donovan's lawyers presented the evidence, the photos, the bank records showing my withdrawals from the safe, and my case crumbled to dust. I had to sign everything. I walked away with nothing but the clothes on my back and a mountain of debt for the money I had stolen. Donovan, ever the efficient businessman, sold my car, my designer handbags, and every piece of jewelry he had ever given me to recoup his losses. Penniless and homeless, I swallowed my pride and went to the one person I thought might help me, Mr. Sterling. I waited for him outside the hotel, looking like a beggar. "What do you want, Lorelei?" he asked, his voice devoid of any warmth. "A job," I pleaded. "Anything. I'll clean the rooms. I'll wash dishes. Please. I have nothing." Or, he looked at me with utter contempt. "You created this mess. You were a liability, and I have no use for you. Stay away from my hotel. Stay away from me." When I tried to beg him again the next day, I was met not by him, but by a police officer who served me with a restraining order. The humiliation was a physical pain, a burning fire in my gut. I had meant nothing to him. I was a cheap thrill, a temporary convenience he had discarded without a second thought. The full weight of my stupidity crashed down on me. I wasn't a career woman who had made a savvy move. I was a fool who had offered herself up to be used. And Landon. The thought of him was a fresh stab of pain every time it crossed my mind. He had played me so perfectly. He found my weakness, my desire to be seen, to be special, and he exploited it masterfully. He had blocked my number, deleted his social media profiles, and vanished without a trace. He was a ghost who had stolen my future. I ended up in a dingy motel room, paying week by week with the last of my savings. My days were a gray blur of regret. I replayed every decision, every lie, every moment of weakness. I saw it all so clearly now. Donovan's love, which I had dismissed as controlling, was genuine. My desire for a career had been twisted by my ego into a justification for betrayal. I had been blinded by a shallow, manufactured love, and I had traded a king for a couple of jesters. I lost track of time. Weeks bled into months. My savings ran out. I was evicted from the motel. I spent a few nights in a shelter before I found a job waiting tables at a Greasy Spoon diner on the other side of town, earning just enough to rent a tiny, bug-infested room. But I couldn't let him go. Some nights, when the self-loathing became too much to bear, I would take a bus back to my old neighborhood. I would stand in the shadows across the street from the beautiful house that was once my home, watching the warm lights glow in the windows. It was a form of self-torture, a pilgrimage to the site of my greatest failure. One evening, I saw him. Donovan. He was walking out the front door, holding it open for someone. A woman emerged, laughing at something he said. She was beautiful, but in a simple, unassuming way. She wasn't wearing designer clothes or dripping with jewels. She looked happy, genuinely happy. He took her hand, and the way he looked at her, it was the same way he used to look at me, but with a new lightness, a new peace. I followed them. From a distance, I watched them have dinner at a small, cozy Italian restaurant. I watched him listen intently as she spoke. I watched them walk home, their fingers intertwined. As I write this, my hands are shaking. I'm sitting in my cramped, lonely room, the smell of stale grease clinging to my clothes. I found out through an acquaintance of an acquaintance that they are engaged. His new life, built upon the ashes of our old one, is beginning. He moved on so quickly. And me? I am here. Unkempt, broke, and haunted. I look in the mirror and see a stranger, a woman with hollow eyes and a story etched in shame. I traded a life of love and security for a fleeting thrill, a cheap illusion. I threatened to leave, and he opened the door and let me walk right into the hell of my own making. There is no redemption for me. There is no going back. There is only the endless echoing silence, filled with the devastating knowledge that I had everything and I threw it all away. My life is a total mess. And the worst part, the part that keeps me awake night after night, is that I have no one to blame but myself.